So there's gas leaking up here.
Well, welcome back to the Cottage Farmstead. I'm Rebecca, and this is my husband Nathan, and we're two old souls working to restore our agricultural and homesteading heritage here in the upstate of South Carolina. And today we're going to be canning tomato sauce. We harvested, I don't know, how many pounds do you think we harvested?
Well, we probably got about 15-20 pounds yesterday.
So we got quite a bit. We're hoping to get maybe 8 to 15 pints of tomato sauce. We're hoping to get about 40 in total. We've done 8 already, so we're going to be trying to get 2 canners going at the same time so that we can be more efficient. So we'll take you along on our journey. So for Christmas last year, we were gifted a outdoor propane 2-burner stove that we were very excited to try out here in the shade. It gets so hot in our kitchen. We don't have central air in there, and the little window unit just can't keep up when we have a pot of tomato sauce bubbling and we're trying to get a water bath canner going. And now that we're doing a steam canner too, it just gets really hot in the summer. So we're very excited to be trying out our new outdoor burner. While Nathan is outside getting the burner set up, I'm in here to get our water bath canning pot and our steam canner and the big old pot that we keep on hand for canning big batches of stuff.
When canning tomatoes, it's important if you see any potential disease or whatnot to cut that away so that you're not canning with that particular part of the tomato. So like with this one here, there's a slight divot and we can see that there's a black spot on it, which means it's some sort of blight or mildew or whatnot. So we'll just take our knife, cut that off, and not use that, but the rest of the tomato will be good.
The first time we've grown a specific Roma variety for canning. We've grown the striped Roman before because we just thought they were pretty and they worked well for canning. But this year we grew the San Martino, and as you can see, it's a very meaty tomato. It's not as watery, so we're looking forward to see how this transforms our tomato sauce. So we grew this Principe Borghese variety, if I'm saying it correctly, with the intention of sun drying it or drying it in our dehydrator for more efficiency. They were a lot smaller than I expected them to be. I thought that they would be a little bit bigger, and they had a lot more juice in the inside than I thought they would too. So I'm not sure if we're going to do it next year. We'll determine based on flavor how much we end up growing this in the future. We're going to try a few Romas as well, see what we think of those, but we'll have those on our salads this coming week. So when you're drying tomatoes, you want to remove as much moisture as you can ahead of time. So I'm taking out the insides of these to get some of the seed and juice out so it'll dry a little bit faster. So we got enough for 2 trays to slide into our dehydrator to dry them, and we're very much looking forward to tasting them next week.
Wow. So we are at 14 pounds, 12 ounces.
Is that subtracting out the bowl?
That it is. So with the other tomatoes, we should be very, very close to the 16 pounds that we need.
Perfect. So if you remember a few weeks ago when we were taking out the onions to cure them and dice them and freeze them, we left some of the small ones in the ground to let them bulb up a little bit more. And as you can see, they have bulbed up nicely. They're a great size. So we're going to be using these that we had left in the ground for our tomato sauce. And we'll also be using some of the other ones that are still in the ground that we haven't pulled yet for our salsa that we'll be doing in a couple weeks. So our recipe for tomato sauce is actually just pretty much straight from the Ball Book of Canning. They have a pretty basic tomato sauce that's fairly neutral in flavor. It has some onion, it has a little bit of garlic, and we add a little bit of basil because we like the flavor of basil, but it's neutral enough that we can add it to some sort of pasta later or chili, or put it on pizza, and we can just season it later when we're cooking rather than doing it right now. So we can just en masse do a whole bunch of tomato sauce at one time. So since we are adding onions, we are going to be adding a little bit of extra citric acid because tomatoes these days are not quite low enough pH to compensate. So we'll be adding citric acid to make sure the pH is low enough to not encourage botulism growth. So now that we've got the tomato sauce on the stove, we're going to let it simmer for 45 minutes to an hour. Towards the end of that time, we're going to start the burner outside with our water bath canner and our steam canner, and we'll start sterilizing our pint jars so that we'll be ready for canning later.
So there's gas leaking up here, and that's right at a brass joint before this throttle here. So unfortunately we will not be able to use this burner, even though this is the one that's leaking, because the turn-off valve here is further in.
Well, we had a change of plans. Since we couldn't repair the gas leak on our outdoor burner, we're bringing the canning jars inside, and we're just going to do the steam canner on the right side and keep our sauce warm on the left side. To sterilize the jars, we're going to put the lid on top, and as it comes to heat, we're going to let it heat up for about 10 minutes. That one didn't fit in there?
There we go.
So we can get 10 in there, right?
I'm pretty sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Perfect. So the goal is to do this 2 or 3 times this evening to get all of the sauce in jars. As you can see, our jars are hot. They're sterile, and they're ready to start filling with tomato sauce. So we're trying the reusable canning lids again for the tomato sauce. We didn't have the best success with doing water earlier. I'll link to that below. We did it with pickles and had decent success with it, so hopefully tomato sauce will be just as good. So with reusable canning lids, the gasket and the lid are 2 separate pieces. The rubber gasket can be used about, I think, up to 10 times before you need to replace it. Plastic lid you can use indefinitely. Then we use the same metal bands that you'd use if you're using a regular metal canning lid. One of the main differences when using these is you need to leave a little bit more head space, and you also need to not tighten it down quite so tightly. With a lot of the metal canning lids, you're doing it to like fingertip tight. This is like fingertip tight, and then back off just a smidge. If it's on there too tight, it's not going to be able to let the air out. These lids are a little bit thicker than the thinner metal ones, so it needs to have enough space to move to allow the air out when you're trying to get that vacuum seal. Round number 1. It'll need to process for 35 minutes, but we have to wait until the gauge on top is for our zone 1 elevation. So the timer just went off for the 35 minutes of processing the 10 pints of tomato sauce. And we're also supposed to let it sit for 5 minutes after we turn off the heat before we take the lid off. So that's what we're waiting on right now. And while that is going on, we got the water bath canner full of empty jars to start sterilizing so that we can switcheroo as soon as it's ready. Alright, so it's been 5 minutes of letting it rest, and we'll take off our lid here. And with reusable jars, we're going to be taking them out and we'll be tightening down their lids, which is a different. So like I said before, the main difference between these and the metal bands is that you tighten them down really well after you take them out of the canner to help it get that vacuum seal. So we have the second batch in the steam canner right now, and so we're going to wrap up the video for today. Tomorrow morning we'll show you how the jar is sealed. Hopefully all of them sealed. We'll find out tomorrow morning. We'll show you what it look like tomorrow. Alright, it's the next morning, so we're going to check and see how these sealed for us. Nope. 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 Not impressed. That one's sealed. Well, it looks like we have a whole bunch of reprocessing we're going to have to do. Alright, so trying to troubleshoot here. We had heard last time we had poor success to be careful in the headspace, so we were very careful. We made sure that we were consistent, that we had the right amount of headspace. We kept the lids loose enough this time, but you can see we were very consistent on that. These were all centered. So they weren't offset. Actually, the ones that sealed were mostly offset, ironically. So we're not sure why we're having so much trouble with these reusable lids. So we'll probably reprocess these with our metal lids that we still have, just to make sure we get them sealed. So as you saw earlier, we had some issues getting our jars to seal, especially these reusable lids. I came in here after about 8 hours and discovered that one that was sealed earlier had already unsealed itself. So we're not super impressed with these reusable lids. We'll try them a couple more times, but we're not sold on them just yet. We did reprocess some of the ones that we had done reusable lids yesterday with metal lids, and about half of them sealed. So we have them over here, and then the ones that didn't seal we transferred to another jar that we froze that we'll use for a different recipe in the future. Thanks so much for joining us in the Cottage Farmstead kitchen this week as we had our adventures and misadventures in canning tomato sauce. We hope you join us in the future, so hit that subscribe button to be notified of any future videos we have. And if you're interested in hearing and seeing more of our experience with these reusable canning lids, I will link to that video right there to my right so that you can check that out. Catch you next time.